Imagine losing everything: your fortune, your friends, your status overnight. That's exactly what happened to billionaire Richard Blackwell, once a household name in the tech world, now a bankrupt shadow of his former self. The headlines were merciless: from tech titan to total loss. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get worse, he found himself eating alone at a dusty corner diner, staring into a chipped coffee cup and wondering how his life had fallen apart so fast. That's where he met her. She wasn't anyone special at first glance, just a quiet, polite waitress named Ellie, barely 20, working double shifts, hair tied back, and eyes that spoke volumes. She wasn't flashy, didn't complain, and never seemed tired, even though it was clear she had every reason to be. But there was something about her, something he couldn't explain. Maybe it was the way she solved a broken credit card reader in under a minute using nothing but a hairpin and a phone charger. Or how she casually corrected his math while totaling his bill faster than the calculator. At first, Richard dismissed it as coincidence, but then curiosity got the better of him. Who was this girl, really? He came back the next day, and the next. Conversations turned into small revelations. Ellie hadn't gone to college, not because she couldn't, but because life hadn't given her the chance. Yet she could quote algorithms, explain quantum computing concepts, and had ideas that rivaled the brightest minds Richard had ever hired. That's when he made a decision no one saw coming, not even Ellie. He asked to adopt her. It sounded insane. A bankrupt billionaire adopting a waitress. But Richard didn't see her as a charity case. He saw her as a second chance. Not just for Ellie, but for himself. For all the mistakes he'd made. For all the talent he'd overlooked when money had blinded him. But what started as a wild gamble quickly turned into something much deeper. As they stepped into this strange new life together, secrets began to surface about Ellie's past, about the people who had tried to silence her brilliance, and about a groundbreaking invention she had kept hidden for years. Richard thought he was saving Ellie, but the truth? She might be the one who saves him. What happens next will test everything: trust, ambition, and the true meaning of family. And just when it seems like they're about to rewrite the rules of everything, someone from Ellie's past returns with a secret that could shatter it all. The moment Richard brought Ellie into his world, everything changed, but not in the way either of them expected. He moved them into a modest house on the edge of the city, far from the glass towers and fast cars he used to call normal. He didn't have the wealth anymore, but he still had connections. And he started using them, not for himself this time, but to get Ellie in front of the right people. Or so he thought. At first, she resisted. She didn't want attention. She didn't want interviews or spotlights or tech investors poking around her notebooks. "I just wanted to build things," she said quietly one night, staring out the window. "Not sell myself to the highest bidder." Richard understood that feeling more than she knew. In his past life, he chased deals and lost himself in the process. He didn't want that for Ellie. But the world had a way of noticing brilliance, even when you tried to hide it. It started with a video, just a grainy clip of Ellie explaining a concept on energy storage to a retired engineer Richard used to work with. The video somehow found its way online, and within days it exploded. Tech forums, startup blogs, even university professors started asking, "Who is this girl?" People were fascinated by her simplicity, her raw intelligence, and the fact that she wasn't part of any system. She didn't come from privilege or elite schools. She was a waitress from a small diner who spoke like a professor and thought like an inventor. But with attention came danger. One night, Ellie came home shaken. She said a man had approached her at a coffee shop, someone who seemed to know too much. He asked about a specific project she'd mentioned to no one except Richard. A project involving clean energy that could disrupt entire industries. He said I was sitting on something worth billions, she whispered. Then he told me to be careful who I trusted. Richard's heart sank. He'd seen it before. The sharks were circling. He tried to protect her, but it became clear that someone was watching. Emails were intercepted. Old associates of Richard started showing up again, people who had vanished when his fortune disappeared. And then there was a mysterious letter left at their door with no name, just a message. Some ideas are too dangerous to share. Ellie began to pull away, not from the work, but from him. As much as Richard wanted to believe he was helping her, she started to question his motives. Did you adopt me to help me or to fix your own legacy? She asked one night, her voice low. He didn't have an answer. Not yet. But someone else did, and they were coming. Ellie stopped sleeping through the night. Her mind never slowed down anymore, constantly spinning with equations, unfinished ideas, and the growing feeling that someone was always a step ahead. The message on the doorstep haunted her, not because of what it said, but because of who might have sent it. Whoever they were, they knew too much, and that meant her past wasn't as buried as she thought. Richard noticed the change. She used to smile at small things, bad jokes, a perfect solder joint, even burned toast. But now her eyes darted to windows, her shoulders stayed tense, and her notebooks never left her side. He tried asking about her past, gently, but she shut down. It doesn't matter, she said, her voice clipped. But Richard knew better. It always matters. One evening, while Ellie was out getting supplies, Richard did something he hadn't done in years. He pulled strings. He reached out to an old contact from the intelligence community, someone who owed him a favor from his early days in tech defense. What came back shocked him. Ellie's name was tied to a confidential research project, something buried deep, classified, and never meant to see the light of day. She had been part of a trial program for gifted youths funded by a private agency, a program that was abruptly shut down after ethical concerns were raised. Richard didn't know what disturbed him more, the fact that she had been part of it, or the fact that she never mentioned it. Meanwhile, Ellie had her own suspicions. She started noticing inconsistencies in Richard's behavior. Phone calls he ended too quickly, documents on his desk half hidden under books, conversations that stopped the moment she walked into the room. As much as she wanted to trust him, the fear in her gut kept whispering otherwise. Was he really trying to help her, or was he trying to control the tech she was working on? The invention Ellie had been refining wasn't just clean energy, it was something more. A system that could run cities independently, without relying on major grids or corporations. It would make billionaires obsolete, and the people who once controlled energy markets knew it. That's why they wanted her silenced. And maybe that's why someone close was leaking her ideas. Then there was the stranger. He started showing up outside the library Ellie used for research. Always in a gray coat. Always reading the same newspaper. She tried to ignore it, but one day, tucked between the pages of her own notebook, she found a warning scribbled in unfamiliar handwriting. He's not who you think he is. She didn't know if it meant Richard, or someone else. But either way, the storm was just beginning. Every day, the tension between Richard and Ellie grew heavier, like a storm cloud refusing to break. Ellie's trust was fraying, and Richard felt powerless to stop it. He wanted to tell her everything, the truth about his past mistakes, the enemies still lurking in the shadows, and the sacrifices he was willing to make to keep her safe. But every time he opened his mouth, the words got caught in his throat. There was too much at stake. The mysterious man in the gray coat wasn't going away. Ellie started seeing him in places she never expected. outside her workplace, near her favorite coffee shop, even parked across the street from the small house they now called home. She never caught his face clearly, but the feeling of being watched became unbearable. She began to fear for her safety, but more than that, she feared what might happen to her invention if it fell into the wrong hands. Richard's old contacts warned him that the stakes were higher than he thought. The energy project Ellie was working on could change everything: the global economy, governments, even the balance of power between nations. Powerful corporations were already mobilizing behind the scenes, pulling strings and spreading misinformation to keep control. Richard realized this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about survival. Allie tried to keep working, but paranoia crept into every corner of her life. She locked her notebooks in a safe, changed passwords daily, and avoided meetings unless Richard was with her. Yet, no matter how careful she was, the leaks continued. Plans that had been kept secret suddenly surfaced in the hands of rival companies, and Richard's phone buzzed nonstop with warnings and threats. One night, Ellie found her laptop missing, taken from the very room where she had left it moments before. Panic flooded her veins. Richard called in favors, digging through security footage, but the thief's identity remained a mystery. Whoever was behind this was playing a long game, and their patience was terrifying. The breaking point came when Richard received an anonymous call. A voice whispered a chilling message: "You don't know who you're protecting. Let her go, or you'll lose everything." Richard hung up, heart pounding, knowing the danger was no longer just around them. It was inside their circle. Allie confronted Richard, demanding answers. "Who do you really work for? Why did you bring me into this? Am I just a pawn?" The questions cut deeper than any threat. Before Richard could answer, the stranger in the gray coat appeared at their doorstep. Calm, cold, and watching. Allie's eyes locked with his for a brief second, and she realized this was the moment everything could change. The moment that would decide whether her brilliance would light the world or be snuffed out forever. And just as the tension reached its peak, the lights in the house flickered, then went dark. The sudden blackout plunged the room into complete darkness. Allie's breath caught in her throat as the silence stretched, broken only by the faint hum of the city outside. Richard fumbled for his phone, the screen casting a dim glow. But before he could call for help, the front door creaked open. The stranger in the gray coat stepped inside without hesitation, as if he owned the place. "Who are you?" Richard demanded, trying to steady his voice despite the fear gnawing at him. The man didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small envelope, tossing it onto the table. Allie's fingers trembled as she picked it up. The envelope was old-fashioned, sealed with wax, and bore no return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper was scribbled with a message that chilled them both. "Trust no one. The greatest threat is closer than you think." A heavy silence followed. Richard and Ellie exchanged a look, questions swirling between them, but no answers in sight. Who was the man? And more importantly, what did he mean by closer than you think? Then, without another word, the stranger turned and vanished into the night, leaving behind an even darker cloud of mystery. Ellie's mind raced. She had already doubted Richard's intentions, but now this message suggested something deeper. Was someone inside their own circle betraying them? Was the person who had been watching, threatening, and stealing her work not an enemy from the outside, but someone they trusted? Richard's phone buzzed again. A text popped up from an unknown number. "Meet me tomorrow at dawn. Come alone. Answers await." It was a trap, he was sure, but ignoring it wasn't an option anymore. That night, they barely slept. Allie's invention, the clean energy system that could have revolutionized the world, was at the center of a dangerous game much bigger than either of them imagined. The stakes had shifted from simple corporate greed to a hidden war involving powerful figures who would stop at nothing to control the future of energy. But who? As dawn approached, Richard and Ellie prepared to face whatever lay ahead. Ellie packed her notes and prototypes into a small bag, her heart heavy with uncertainty. Richard promised he'd be nearby, but respected the unknown caller's demand. When Ellie arrived at the meeting spot, a quiet, abandoned park, she saw a silhouette waiting in the shadows. As she stepped closer, the figure moved into the light. It wasn't the man in the gray coat. It was someone she never expected. Someone from her own past. Someone she thought she had left behind forever. The revelation hit like a thunderclap. This was no longer just about invention or survival. It was personal. And the real battle was only just beginning. Ellie's heart pounded as she stared at the figure emerging from the shadows. A face she hadn't seen in years, but never truly forgotten. It was Max, her childhood friend who had disappeared without explanation when their lives took different paths. Max's eyes held a mixture of regret and urgency, and before Ellie could speak, he pulled her aside. "Ellie, you don't know the full story," Max said quietly. "The project you're working on, it's bigger than you think. I was part of that secret program too. They shut it down because it threatened powerful interests. But there's more. People want to weaponize your invention, turn it into something dangerous. I came to warn you." The pieces started clicking into place for Ellie. The threats, the leaks, the strange surveillance. It wasn't just corporate espionage. It was a conspiracy involving government agencies, private contractors, and ruthless businessmen willing to do anything to maintain control over energy resources. Richard arrived moments later, breathless but ready. The tension between him and Ellie melted away as they united with Max. Together, they formulated a plan to expose the truth, using Ellie's invention not just to power cities, but to shine a light on the corruption behind the scenes. They hacked into encrypted files, revealing names, dates, and transactions that confirmed everything Max had said. With hard evidence in hand, they arranged a live broadcast to reveal the conspiracy to the world. The risk was enormous. If they failed, they could lose everything, maybe even their lives. As the broadcast went live, their story spread like wildfire. The public outcry was immediate and intense. Powerful figures were forced to answer questions, and investigations launched. Ellie's clean energy project became a symbol of hope and resistance, proof that innovation could challenge even the most entrenched power structures. But just as victory seemed within reach, an unexpected message arrived. A video showing someone close to Richard handing over critical research to an unknown buyer. The betrayal cut deep. The final twist shattered the fragile trust they had rebuilt. Richard's own right-hand man was the traitor all along, playing a dangerous game for personal gain. Ellie and Richard realized their fight wasn't over. The enemy had been inside their circle, and the battle for the future was far from finished. But now, armed with truth, courage, and each other, they were ready to face whatever came next. In a world hungry for change, their story had only just begun. The betrayal hit Richard harder than he expected. His trusted right-hand man, someone he had relied on since his fall from grace, had been feeding secrets to those who wanted to bury Ellie's invention and silence them both. But instead of breaking him, the revelation fueled Richard's determination. He knew the fight wasn't just about business anymore. It was about integrity, trust, and the future they wanted to build together. Ellie, too, felt the weight of the betrayal, but she refused to let it define her. She realized that her genius wasn't just in the invention itself, but in her resilience and ability to see beyond setbacks. With Max and Richard at her side, she began working to secure her project in ways no one could compromise again. using blockchain technology and decentralized networks to protect her clean energy system from interference or theft. As weeks passed, the public's response only grew stronger. People rallied behind the idea of accessible, clean energy that wasn't controlled by monopolies or governments. Ellie's story, from waitress to visionary inventor, became an inspiration. She had shown that brilliance can come from anywhere, and that sometimes the most unlikely heroes are the ones who change the world. Richard slowly rebuilt his reputation, not as a billionaire or a tech mogul, but as a man willing to admit his mistakes and fight for something greater than himself. His bankruptcy had been painful, but it was also the catalyst that brought Ellie into his life, and with her, a chance to start over. Max stayed close, proving to be a loyal ally, and the three of them formed a tight-knit team dedicated to transparency and innovation. Their combined efforts attracted like-minded investors and engineers, creating a community centered on collaboration rather than competition. Looking back, Ellie knew that her journey had been about more than just invention or escape from her past. It was about trust, learning to trust herself, to trust others, and to understand that true genius isn't just intelligence, but courage and heart. In the end, the biggest discovery wasn't the technology itself, but the power of human connection and perseverance in the face of overwhelming odds. The world was changing, and Ellie's clean energy system was just the beginning. As the sun rose on a new chapter, Richard, Ellie, and Max stood together, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, not as billionaire and waitress, but as partners in hope and change. Sometimes the greatest failures lead to the most extraordinary beginnings. And in their story, the future was brighter than ever.